On a rainy evening, Sarah was driving back home after visiting her parents in the next town. The weather was terrible, with heavy rain and strong winds, making it hard to see the road ahead. She drove cautiously, her knuckles white from gripping the steering wheel. As she navigated a particularly desolate stretch of highway, she noticed a figure on the side of the road. It was a man, drenched from the rain, holding a sign that read, "Help." Sarah hesitated, but then decided to stop and offer assistance. She rolled down her window slightly and asked, "Do you need help?" The man nodded vigorously. "Thank you. My car broke down a few miles back. Can you give me a lift to the nearest gas station?" Sarah nodded and unlocked the passenger door. The man climbed in, shaking off the rain. He looked worn out and anxious. He said, "I'm John," with extending a hand. She replied, shaking his hand. "The nearest gas station is about 10 miles ahead. I can take you there." "Thank you, Sarah. I really appreciate it," John said with his voice filled with relief. They drove in silence for a few miles, the rain pounding on the car roof. Sarah tried to make small talk to ease the tension. "So what were you doing out here in this weather?" "I was visiting a friend, but didn't realize how bad the storm would get," John replied. "I didn't expect my car to break down either." As they drove further, Sarah began to feel uneasy. Something about John seemed off, but she couldn't put her finger on it. She glanced at him occasionally, noticing his tense posture and the way he kept glancing around nervously. Suddenly, John grabbed her arm. "Sarah, you need to turn off the road. Now." "What? Why?" she asked, startled by his sudden outburst. "Just trust me. Please, turn off the road," he insisted, his grip tightening. Sarah's instincts told her to trust him, despite her fear. She took the next exit, leading them onto a narrow, winding road through the forest. The rain continued to pour, making it difficult to see. "What's going on, John?" she demanded, her voice shaking. John took a deep breath and explained, "I lied to you. My car didn't break down. I was running away from something. There's something dangerous on that highway, and it's been following me." Sarah's heart raced as she processed his words. "What do you mean, something? Like an animal?" "No," John replied in his voice trembling. "It's not an animal. It's something evil, something that preys on people driving alone at night." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. She didn't know whether to believe him, but the fear in his eyes was real. She drove on, her mind racing with possibilities. As they rounded a bend, Sarah saw headlights in her rearview mirror. A car was following them, its lights blinding in the darkness. "Is that it?" she asked with panic rising in her voice. John turned to look, his face paling. "Yes, that's it. We need to get away from it." Sarah pressed the gas pedal, speeding down the narrow road. The car behind them accelerated, keeping pace. She could feel the malevolent presence closing in, and her fear intensified. "There's a turn coming up," John said urgently. "Take it and don't stop." Sarah did as he said, swerving onto an even narrower road that led deeper into the forest. The car behind them followed, its headlights piercing through the rain. "Keep going," John urged. "We need to lose it." They sped through the winding road, branches scraping against the sides of the car. The pursuing vehicle was relentless, its presence almost palpable. Sarah's hands trembled as she gripped the wheel, her eyes fixed on the road ahead. Suddenly, the road opened up into a clearing. John pointed to a small cabin in the distance. "Head there. We can take shelter." Sarah drove towards the cabin, skidding to a stop outside. They jumped out of the car and ran inside, slamming the door behind them. The cabin was dark and empty, but it felt like a sanctuary compared to the terror outside. They huddled together, listening to the rain and the distant sound of the pursuing car. Minutes felt like hours as they waited, their fear palpable. After what felt like an eternity, the sound of the car faded away. John let out a sigh of relief. "I think we lost it." Sarah sank to the floor, her body trembling. "What was that thing, John? Why was it after you?" John shook his head. "I don't know. All I know is that it targets people driving alone at night. It preys on their fear and feeds on it. I was lucky to find you when I did." They stayed in the cabin until the storm passed, too afraid to venture back outside. When morning came, they cautiously made their way back to the road. There was no sign of the car that had chased them. Relieved but still shaken, they returned to Sarah's car and drove to the nearest gas station in silence, the weight of the night's terror still heavy on their minds. At the gas station, John thanked Sarah profusely for her help and warned her to be cautious on the road. He planned to call for a tow truck and get his car fixed before continuing his journey. Sarah offered to stay with him until the tow truck arrived, not wanting to leave him alone after everything they had been through. While they waited, they decided to look up any information they could find about the sinister presence that had chased them. The gas station attendant, an older man named Hank, noticed their anxious expressions and asked if they were okay. Reluctantly, they shared their story. Hank's face grew serious. "I've heard tales about something like that," he said. "Locals call it the Night Stalker. It's been around for decades, preying on lone travelers. Most people don't believe the stories, but I've seen enough to know there's something out there." Hank told them about other encounters he had heard of, each one more terrifying than the last. The Night Stalker was a malevolent entity that seemed to appear out of nowhere, targeting those who were vulnerable and alone. Some said it was the spirit of a vengeful driver who had died on the highway, while others believed it was a manifestation of pure evil. As they listened to Hank's stories, Sarah and John realized how lucky they had been to escape. They vowed to warn others about the danger and to avoid traveling alone at night whenever possible. When the tow truck finally arrived, John thanked Sarah again and gave her his contact information. They promised to stay in touch, bound by the shared experience of their harrowing night. Sarah continued her journey home, constantly checking her rearview mirror for any signs of the Night Stalker. She felt a mix of fear and determination, knowing that she had survived something truly terrifying. She decided to share her story with friends and family, hoping to raise awareness and keep others safe. As the weeks went by, Sarah and John kept in touch, finding comfort in their shared experience. They both made changes in their lives to ensure they were never caught in such a vulnerable situation again. Sarah installed a dashcam in her car and always let someone know her travel plans. John became more cautious and made sure his car was always in good working condition. The encounter with the Night Stalker had left a lasting impact on both of them. They remained vigilant, always aware of the dangers that lurked in the shadows. The experience had taught them the importance of being prepared and looking out for each other. Despite the fear they had endured, Sarah and John found strength in their resilience. They had faced a terrifying unknown entity and survived. Their bond grew stronger as they shared their story with others, hoping to prevent anyone else from falling victim to the Night Stalker. Years later, the memory of that rainy night still haunted them. But they have learned to live with the fear. They continued to warn others about the dangers of hitchhiking and traveling alone at night. Their story served as a reminder of the thin line between the ordinary and the supernatural, and the importance of staying vigilant in the face of the unknown. On a rainy evening, Tom was driving back to this small town after a business trip. The heavy rain made the road ahead difficult to see, and the winding country roads were treacherous. The storm had come out of nowhere, turning a peaceful drive into a tense journey. As he navigated the twisting roads, Tom saw a figure standing on the side of the road, drenched and shivering. The figure held out a thumb, signaling for a ride. Tom hesitated, but then decided to stop. He couldn't leave someone out in this weather. He rolled down the window slightly and called out, "Need a lift." The figure, a young woman with long dark hair and pale skin, nodded gratefully. "Yes, please. Thank you." Tom unlocked the door, and the woman climbed in, water dripping from her clothes. "I'm Tom," he said, trying to sound friendly despite his growing unease. "I'm Laura," she replied softly. "Thank you for stopping." Tom asked, "Where are you headed?" "Just up the road a bit," she said. "I'll tell you when to stop." They drove in silence for a while, the only sounds the rain pounding on the roof and the wipers struggling to keep the windshield clear. Tom tried to make small talk, but Laura seemed distant, staring out the window with a blank expression. After a few miles, Laura suddenly said, "Turn here," pointing to a narrow, overgrown road that Tom had never noticed before. He hesitated but complied, turning onto the bumpy path. It was even darker and more isolated than the main road. "Are you sure this is the right way?" Tom asked, his voice tinged with doubt. "Yes," Laura replied, her tone firm. "Just keep going." The road wound through dense forest, and Tom felt a growing sense of dread. Something about this didn't feel right, but he couldn't turn back now. As they drove deeper into the woods, the trees seemed to close in around them, blocking out what little light remained. Suddenly, Laura pointed ahead. "Stop here." Tom stopped the car and looked around. They were in a small clearing, surrounded by towering trees. There was no sign of a house or any other structure. "This is where you live?" Tom asked with confused face. Laura turned to him, her eyes filled with sadness. "No, this is where I died." Tom's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" Laura's expression changed, becoming more intense. "I was killed here 10 years ago. I've been waiting for someone to help me find peace." Tom felt a chill run down his spine. What happened? Laura took a deep breath. "I was hitchhiking home one night when a man picked me up. He brought me here and he killed me. My body was never found, and my spirit has been trapped here ever since." Tom's mind raced. He had heard stories of haunted hitchhikers, but never believed them. Now he was face to face with one. "What can I do to help you?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Help me find my body," Laura said. "It's the only way I can be free." Tom nodded, feeling a mix of fear and determination. "Okay, where should we start?" Laura pointed to a spot in the clearing. "I think it's over there." Tom grabbed a flashlight from the glove compartment and stepped out of the car. The rain had eased to a drizzle, but the ground was muddy and slippery. He followed Laura's direction, shining the light on the spot she had indicated. He began to dig with his hands, the mud cold and slick. After a few minutes, his fingers brushed against something hard. He dug faster, uncovering a small wooden box. His heart pounded as he opened it, revealing a set of human bones. Tom recoiled in horror, but Laura's voice urged him on. "Please, don't stop now." He carefully lifted the bones out of the box, his hands shaking. Laura's form began to glow, becoming more transparent. "Thank you, Tom," she said, her voice echoing in the stillness. "You freed me." With that, she vanished, leaving Tom alone in the clearing. He sat back, breathing heavily, the realization of what had just happened sinking in. He had helped a restless spirit find peace, but the experience had shaken him to his core. Tom knew he had to report this to the 8 authorities, but he also felt a sense of closure. Laura's tragic story had finally come to an end, and her spirit was at rest. The next day, Tom led the police to the clearing, where they recovered the remains and launched an investigation. The case made headlines, and the town was abuzz with the story of the haunted hitchhiker and the man who had helped her find peace. Tom's life returned to normal, but he never forgot Laura. He often thought about that rainy night and the spirit he had encountered. It changed him, making him more aware of the mysteries and tragedies that can linger in the world. From that day on, Tom was always cautious when driving at night, especially in the rain. He knew that the spirits of the past sometimes reached out for help, and he was determined to be ready if it ever happened again. The experience had left a lasting mark on him, a reminder of the thin line between the living and the dead, and the power of compassion to bring peace to even the most troubled souls.